We know that there are 206 bones in our body. By now we are very well aware of the structure of the bone. Now what we have to do is that we need to understand how that skeleton is present inside our body, its orientation, basically location, and the bones which are present. Also we are aware that there are two types of skeletons. If we have to divide entire human skeleton, we can divide it into two parts, that is the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. Now what we are going to talk about is the axial skeleton. One by one we are going to see how many bones are present and in what location they are present. How can we classify one particular region of the axial skeleton from and how it is different from the other one. So basically, first thing that we need to know is what is axial skeleton if you are being asked a proper definition. So axial skeleton comprises of the skeletal elements which are present along the longitudinal axis of the body. You know that longitudinal axis, now earlier also I told you that suppose this is an individual, this axis over where, this is quite a funny individual, as you can see. The stick diagrams that we used to make, stick drawings that we used to make in our childhood, it's like that. This part, entire axis is longitudinal axis and it comprises the axial skeleton. Now as many as 80 bones are present in the axial skeleton, and what we have to see is what are the various parts in which these 80 bones are present. Firstly, the parts of the axial skeleton are skull, the vertebral column, ribs and sternum. This is the part of the axial skeleton. Talking about skull, there are 29 bones which are present in the skull, and what are those bones? We are going to see. Skull is nothing but this part of the head that we call, in general vernacular terms we call it head. That part is basically, we have to see the skeletal elements of that, that would be termed under skull. That entire bony structure would be termed as skull. And how many bones? 29 bones. Okay, first thing to be remembered. Next, what we have to remember is that inside skull, if we are discussing skull, we have first part, that is the cranium. Second part happens to be facial bones. Third part is a single bone, that is hyoid bone, and fourth one is the ear ossicles present in the middle ear. We have talked about it, a little bit of introduction was given to you earlier. Now cranium is the box like structure. It has as many as 8 bones. Now these bones are flattened bones they form a box like structure in which house the brain, human brain inside them, and these 8 bones, as they are flattened and they are joined at such points and they are joined in such a way that the joints happen to be immovable. They are very stiff, so we have the 8 bones forming a box, and these bones, the upper jaw of our skull is fused with these cranial bones, the upper jaw, while the lower jaw that is present, that is joined to the cranium by muscles. This part is to be remembered, that with this cranium there is the upper jaw which is fused and the lower jaw happens to be joined to this cranium by muscles. Now we come to the next part of the skull, that is the facial bones. They are 14 in number. Alright, so they form the front, this nose and the lower jaw part. The frontal part of the skull is made up of facial bones which are 14 in number. You need not to remember the names of individual bones. If you can remember, when we study the skull diagrammatically, that time we will discuss the names, but for now you have to remember the number of bones, and importantly you have to remember that the eye sockets and the nose bones, they are present in the facial bones. Then at the base of buccal cavity there lies a single bone that is known as hyoid bone, which is present at the base of buccal cavity, and 6 bones known as ear ossicles are present in the middle part of the ear. Ear is divided into human ear. There are 2 ears that are present. There is external ear, middle ear and internal ear. The middle ear has 3 bones present in it which are known as ear ossicles, 3 in each, so in total they become 6. And the ear ossicles, you need to remember their names because they are of great importance in from exam point of view. Otherwise also, if you have interest in the human skeleton, you can memorize each and every bone if you want to, but these you have to remember that malleus, incus and stapes are the 3 bones which are present in the ear, and they are the smallest bones of our body. So this is what we have in skull. Next what we have is the vertebral column. Now in the vertebral column there are 26 bones, and the term used for the bones in the vertebral column is vertebrae. So there are 26 vertebrae which are present. Now when we talk about vertebral column, first thing, it starts from the brain. That is not brain, I'm sorry, it starts from the skull. Skull has 2 round protuberances present in it at the end of the occipital bone, and those protuberances are known as occipital condyles, which are present. They are 2 in number. These occipital condyles, they articulate with the vertebral column with the first vertebrae. The name of first vertebrae is atlas. Second one is axis, and these happen to be the part of cervical vertebrae. So the occipital condyles, they articulate. This part is of skull, all right, and this atlas part, there is an articulation present. There are 2 occipital condyles. The atlas comes and articulates over here. The atlas being the first vertebrae, there is articulation, and what we have to learn over here in the vertebral column is the vertebrae, how they are named, how much they are in number. Now they are named accordingly. The name is given such that the region basically where they are present, named in such a way they are. First 7 vertebrae are cervical, then we have thoracic vertebrae, they are 12 in number, then we have lumbar vertebrae which are 5, then comes 2 fused bones. They are triangular bones which are having many bones fused together. The first fused bones is known as sacrum, and the second one where the vertebral column ends is known as coccyx. So this is what is the vertebral column all about. Now this vertebral column is house for the spinal cord. Spinal cord that originates from the foramen magnum of the brain, it passes through the vertebral column. That means vertebral column is a hollow bone structure which has a hollow cavity inside it, that becomes the passage of spinal cord. So in total we have 26 vertebrae. How they are named, that you have to remember. What is the number, that is what is the number of each region of the vertebral column, that you have to remember. And another thing, if you can remember, that is the first cervical vertebrae is atlas, and the second one is axis, and the remaining 5 are there. Then there are thoracic vertebrae, then the lumbar ones, sacral and coccyx, and inside each vertebra there is spinal cord which is passing through the hollow cavity inside it. Next is ribs. Now in case of ribs, you know that our body has rib cage which houses the diaphragm and the lungs. Heart of course is present over there. So basically this ribs is, these ribs are providing a protective structure to the important visceral organs. When we talk about ribs, first thing you have to remember is that they are 12 in number. Yes, of course they are 12 in number. Why they are 12 in number? Because they form the rib cage, which is in the number being similar to those of the thoracic vertebrae. That thing is kept in mind, all right. Now the thoracic vertebrae were also 12 in mind, 12 in number, sorry. Now what we have to remember is, because the ribs, they have to form a cage, there are 12 pairs of ribs which are present. They have 2 facets basically. Now those 2 facets form the rib cage basically. What is there in the ventral side? Now supposedly you have a circular structure, and consider your own skeleton if you can. The dorsal side, that is of the back. The dorsal side is having the vertebral column. So the vertebral column lies towards the dorsal side. So the rib cage has dorsal side, which is the vertebral column, and there are 12 thoracic vertebrae where each facet of the rib comes and articulates. This is the dorsal side. While on the ventral side, there lies a bone known as sternum, which is a flattened bone almost 15 centimeter in length, and the front facet comes and articulates in the sternum, and the joining happens to be that of hyoid cartilage or hyaline cartilage, not hyoid cartilage. Hyoid is a bone basically. Hyaline cartilage is responsible for the joining of the ribs to the vertebral column, because then only there is a cage formation that takes place. Now you know that there are 12 thoracic vertebrae, so there are 12 pairs. Now the ribs have been classified. Also you got aware of what is sternum. Sternum is a flat bone where this where the ribs come and join, and lies towards the ventral side of the body, and the rib cage is formed. Now the 12 pairs, there are first pairs that are true ribs, which are 7 in number. The first 7 ribs, they are proper, as I told you in the description, that the back side would be articulated with the vertebral column while the front would be joined to the sternum. The 7th pair of ribs, the first 7 pair of ribs, those which originate from the first 7 thoracic vertebrae, they come and join the sternum. They increase in size towards the periphery, and then they come and join to the sternum. That is what is in the case of true ribs. Then the remaining 5 ribs, which are present, they are not true ribs. There are first 3 ribs, that is 8th, 9th and 10th rib, of course originating from the 8th, 9th and 10th thoracic vertebrae. They are vertebrochondral ribs. Vertebrochondral ribs. Now these vertebrochondral ribs are otherwise known as floating ribs. Now when I use the word, sorry, not floating ribs, they are false ribs. Alright, they are joined to each other, and at the same time they are joined to the 7th rib. The 7th rib that is present, they are joined, all this 8th, 9th and 10th, they start from the vertebral column, they are joined to each other, and then they are joined together to the 7th rib, and that is why they are known as false ribs. The last 2, that is the 11th and the 12th pair of ribs, is of the floating ribs, which is 11th and 12th. They originate from the 11th and 12th thoracic vertebrae, and they do not join anywhere. That means they are present as it is, which you feel, if you touch over here, you do feel the bone that is quite hard. That is those are the floating ribs which are present anteriorly. They do not come and fuse with these false ribs or the sternum, hence they are known as floating ribs. So this is all about the axial skeleton. We have got an account of how 80 bones which we said are present in the axial skeleton, how they are arranged, where they are arranged, what is the number in each part, and the skull houses the brain, it has the facial bones, the cranium is present, vertebral column, there are 26 vertebrae which are present, it articulates with the pelvic girdle, the pectoral girdle, the skull, it is the vertebral column which basically articulates with all these parts. Then there are 12 pairs of ribs which originate from the 12 thoracic vertebrae and come and join to the sternum, not all of them, but profusely they do. And last one is the sternum. Sternum is the frontal bone, the flat bone which is present towards the ventral side. So this is all about the axial skeleton.